Hello and welcome to was the first of what is hopefully the newest set of DIY that I can give you. Um, Sorry about the timestamp in the corner. I didn't realize I didn't get the GoPro set up very well. What I'm doing right now is putting in the new i5 processor to the motherboard on the laptop. Of course, I forgot some of the tools that I'd need to complete the build, so there will be periods of times where I disappear, but don't worry about that, since I was able to cut it out. What I have to do is put the processor in, make sure all the pins are in, and there's a little black dot right above where my fingers are right now that has to be tightened down with a flathead screwdriver or some kind of strong piece of metal. I shouldn't have used the hard drive casing, to put it mildly. Well, I did some prep work before I started the video to clean the die off of the processor as well, or in the heatsink. Had to clean the old thermal grease off of it. I decided to start doing this project because basically what I wanted to do was to give you guys more of a idea of what I do actually on a daily basis other than my other two jobs, as well as recording games. Alright, looks like I'm back. Thermal paste is very important when putting down the computer, putting the heatsink on a processor or video card, because without it there is a possibility you could overheat the system due to bad contact between the processor die and the heatsink. And you want to apply just a small dab. Unfortunately, the damn thing squirted out at me, so I have to spread it out and kind of thin it out at the same time. So I take you can take anything from a neoprene glove or a small Ziploc baggie to spread the paste around like I'm doing now. Then it's important to also cover the area on the heat sinks to give it a good thermal contact. Otherwise you'll end up blowing the CPU, or a possibility of blowing the CPU, as well as whatever else that it is connected to. Now, I got lucky on this because the processor is the only thing that's on the heatsink. Now, there are other motherboards where the processor and the graphics card are also on the same heatsink. While I was at my desk, I also grabbed my tools so I could screw these down. You'll need a pair of angled tweezers, Phillips head screwdriver, PH00, I think. Now what I did was I put in the number 4 before I put in the other one, so I loosened it up so I could fit number 1, number 2, number 3, and then tighten down number 4. There's number 1. You have to tighten them down in an X pattern. It's 3. 4. Now, before you actually, okay, and that's the Wi-Fi card. So what you're looking at is the actual bottom of the motherboard. So I've got to put everything in and hook everything up that's down there before I can put the motherboard back in the casing. I would like to say at this point in time that this is not endorsed or sponsored by anyone. This build is completely self-funded. All totaled of parts were about 50 bucks, so I could build this machine. A lot of it actually came with the computer whenever I got it. The only thing I'm upgrading is the memory and the processor. That's the memory card, 4 gigabyte DDR3 SODIMM. There's the CMOS battery. That's actually a very important part because without it, the BIOS would continuously reset. And that's something that you really don't want. That is the power supply cord for the daughter board, which you see right there in front of you. It was a little difficult to get it in there because I didn't realize that I needed to put it in there before I put the heatsink on. But I got it on and it works. Alright. Well, there's one thing I forgot to do before putting or test fitting, and that was put the heatsink fan. I had plugs in on the bottom, so I have to set it up. And what I'm doing now, unfortunately, I didn't realize it was off camera, is what am I doing? Anyway, the Wi-Fi had to be, or the Wi-Fi board had to be connected to the antennas, which you can see at the very top of the screen, the white and the black. Maybe I did do it. Okay. Yes, I'm pointing that out now. The antennas where they go on the Wi-Fi board are actually marked white and black, so you don't have to guess as to where they go. Granted that this is just one example of a laptop. There are many, many kinds of different laptops, take different motherboards, different layouts on everything, different processors. Some of them you can't even work on because they're considered what they call a BGA, which is actually soldered to the processor, soldered to the motherboard. Okay. So now would be the test fit for the motherboard, and you gotta have that. Make sure that video cable is out of the way, and I'm pushing the wireless antenna wires out of the way because otherwise they're going to be sitting underneath the hard drive. This is where I don't think I didn't realize that I'd forgotten the fan until I actually got the motherboard in. Yep, there's the fan. So, you got to plug it in from the bottom. Right there at that connector. Once you get that in, you have to set down the motherboard first, then the fan, because there's a flap that sits on top of the fan that goes on top of the heatsink itself. Alright, there's the LCD board that lets you know if the thing is powered on, the hard drive light, blah blah blah. You'd think something so small would be easy to get in there, but actually it was very tedious and didn't want to fit on the mount point. But I got it in there without problem. And now I'm showing the hard drive, which is the old hard drive is 320 gig, and the new one is a 500 gig Samsung. And my finger's covering it up. I didn't realize, it was kind of hard to see myself on the camera whenever I don't have a computer hooked up to the camera so I can see myself. Taking the old hard drive casing off and putting it on the new one because you have to put it in a certain ways, otherwise, and you line up the holes, otherwise it won't fit into the unit properly. Generally there's only one way to put those on because of the way the holes line up, which is a good thing for beginners or because it makes it easy to swap hard drives. The only difficult part about the entire build was actually getting the laptop apart, which really wasn't that difficult at all. Some of them you have to completely unbolt, take everything off. You have to maneuver around, take certain things off at certain times, all that other good stuff. But this one I just had to undo all of the screws from the bottom of the okay, I'm setting the hard drive aside, so because I've still got more stuff that I needed to do. There I'm getting ready to put in the daughter board with the power jack. And moving the cable out of the way so it doesn't impede getting in there. And then putting in the mount screws. so it doesn't fly away, and then I've got to plug in the power cord. I think right now I'm just fussing with the motherboard because it's not sitting down on the case properly. Sorry, my cat's trying to get in my lap. Not on video. Thankfully, I don't let him in to my. I'm putting the mounting screws into the fan right now. And putting the well, it's aluminum tape, and it's part of the static electricity discharge system for the laptop system. But there's some right there on the motherboard, there's some on the other side, there's even some on the keyboard, and I'm plugging in the video cable right now for the LCD screen. And now I'm getting ready to plug in the daughter board ribbon cable that allows for the connection on the USB. Or data transfer on the USB. I'm plugging in the speakers, those two black things that were already inside the system are the speakers for that system. And there I'm finished with the actual build. Now all that's left to do is to mount down the motherboard. With the screws. And I'm pointing out where the screws go. It's very important to make sure that you get the motherboard mounted to the case, otherwise it could cause issues later on, where the motherboard could warp due to heat. Even though the fan does take care of that a lot, but you're right there where the processor's sitting. Could get extremely hot, and if you didn't have it mounted down properly, the whole board could just bend. And if that could cause, that could actually cause the trace to break, and the whole laptop can shut down. Okay, the hard drive is going in. Yes, I know I'm a dingus because I bent one of the pins on the mount earlier in the video. But it slid right in. Now I'm securing the hard drive to the case. It really helps on the deeper parts to have an angled pair of needle nose pliers or tweezers, angled tweezers, to be able to set the screws down in. Now that the hard drive is in and mounted, next will be the data ribbon for the LCD board, which I'm holding there. I gotta make sure that there's a black line that is on those. We gotta make sure it's lined up with the end of that, so it'll actually seat down properly and display what it's supposed to. Same with the other one. Sometimes you're having to use the tweezers to help get some of the ribbon cables in too, especially the smaller ones. Or in hard to reach places. Next is the keyboard. On this particular unit, the keyboard and touchpad are actually built onto the palm rest. I was pointing out that there was a missing cable, which was for the touchpad. And I'm going to get that missing cable from my desk. Alright, I found the cable. Working on laptops is a lot more tedious than what it used to be. It's a lot less tedious than what it used to be. Back in the early 2000s, I tried to take apart an old gateway, still running Windows XP on a Pentium 3 processor, and ended up ripping the keyboard cable out because there was about 500 other steps that I needed to do before I could get the keyboard ribbon out. Now that those are in, we set the keyboard tray down. Snap it back into place. And that is practically the end of the build. Now, making sure that the cables aren't getting pinched. That's, there you have a fully assembled laptop. And don't worry, folks, I will be putting the screws back in on the bottom. I've just got a couple more things I need to do to it before I can actually finalize it. I just wanted to show you guys the basics on how hard it is to actually assemble a laptop properly. Okay, and now it is time for first boot. And there you go. i5 3230M, 2.6 gigahertz, and 4 gigs of RAM. I was trying to remember how to change the settings. It's been a while since I've worked with an older BIOS like this. Okay, now I'm showing you that the hard drive has been recognized. As well as what needs to show on the graphics. Intel's inside built on. And then I'm showing you the installation disk for Windows. And this is very important because I actually had to completely clear out the BIOS on that. I didn't think that I booted it with the USB on. Because if it doesn't, this particular laptop, if it doesn't detect a boot cycle or an executable, it will automatically default into the BIOS. And that is how you assemble a laptop. Next comes the tedious operating system install. Yes, I know, Windows 8.1, but it is the operating system that the Windows 8 operating system is actually, the key is actually not anywhere on the laptop. It is actually burned into the motherboard. I know that sounds confusing because how can you burn a piece of paper into the motherboard? Well, it's actually a chip inside the computer that tells the Windows operating system, hey, this is the CD key. or this is the product key for your copy of Windows. And it tells Windows to go ahead and install. So if I had tried to install Windows 7, it would have asked me for a CD or a product key for Windows 7. Alright. And now it is loading up the files. Alright, now we're getting into the operating system install, or the finalization of it anyway. Naming the computer is the hardest thing because I've got so many that are named like Trinity, Serenity, and all that other good stuff. So I decided to just name this one my travel laptop, otherwise Phoenix-Travel. And give it that gold background, which unfortunately gets taken over by Windows 8. Okay. This is the part where I need to blur out a little bit of that, because nobody needs to know my Wi-Fi password. Tried to hide it, but I ended up hiding it from myself. I'm still gonna blur it out anyway. And go through personalization, then you go and connect yourself, and then you can go through and do your own little thing on the settings, but 90% of the time they just skip it out. What I don't like about Windows 8 is the simple fact that they make you log in to your Microsoft account, which this part will be blurred as well because nobody needs to know my email or password to that either. And there you have it. A fully working laptop built from the ground up. And just to show you, everything is as it should be. It is, Windows is showing it as a i5 CPU with 4 gig of RAM, 64-bit operating system. All devices are installed except for 2, which I can get from the Asus website. And that is, as they say, that. So, if you like this video, hit the like button, share, love, subscribe if you wish. Desktop build from the ground up coming soon. I have to finalize a few more parts for it, but everything's coming together smoothly. And I will see you in the next video. Later.